Welcome to Appreciating the Entrepreneurial Journey, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Cannon Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business success, and financial independence.
Hello and welcome to the show. Our topic today is one that is often ignored until too late or often not well thought out and advanced, and that is the topic of succession planning. And we have one of Atlanta's leading experts on the show with us today. His name is Joel Koblentz. He's CEO and founder of the Koblentz Group. He and his team have worked with hundreds of public and private companies, family offices, family businesses on board assignments, board development, and recruitment of senior executives. I like to say they align human capital with business value creation, and they do it extremely well for over 3 decades. What you'll hear in today's podcast are some key things around this challenging subject. When is the right time to begin thinking about succession planning, and how do you do it? How do you attract the quality leader you want and successor to you in your business? And what is the game plan for a new leader or CEO as your successor? What should be expected when they come in? We talk about many other things as well, but those topics will be front and center. So sit back and enjoy this great episode with Joel Koblentz. Let's jump into the succession planning side. I know that's certainly a key part of your work and what I want to focus on today. And we've got a couple of ways to cover it, but I think, the first question is, when is it ever too early? Let's say you're a first generation business owner or entrepreneur. Is it ever too early to think about succession planning? When do you tell people to start thinking about it?
You can tell them to start thinking about it from day one, but honestly, most don't and won't because it's not in front of them at the moment. We know that if you were to look at startup businesses, a high percentage fail in the first year. So it's not uncommon in fact, very common for a business owner to say, let me work my way through this. This is my dream. This is my baby. This is what I want to do. This is a big part of me personally and professionally, and for my family as well. And it's a way to prove yourself. So many do not go into succession planning. But what happens is, as businesses grow, usually the founder, who may consider herself the smartest person in the room, they find out that as a business grows, you have to have a different level of expertise in order to carry the business forward. You can't be the chief cook and bottle washer just by yourself. Okay, and they have a problem at figuring out how to be a distributive leader. In other words, handing off part of the roles and responsibilities that normally you'd see in a bigger company, in helping them develop it in their own company. Mm-hmm. And, oftentimes they feel like that their dream is somehow impacted by the people that they bring in, because the dream isn't laying out exactly the way that they thought it would lay out, and it's because of other people that they brought in, not themselves. So what we've told business owners is to say, look, take a good hard look at yourself in the mirror. Know what you're truly capable of, where your interests really lie. And then begin, like in any great leader will know that they're not a leader for all seasons and all situations. These businesses are going to go through great change. All of them will. So how do you prepare yourself? How do you have both the strategic mindset on one hand and the ability to execute on the other, the more tactical? You can't be, as businesses get larger, you can't be the person, ordering the product on one hand and serving customers and putting tires on the car on the other. Okay, you need people who are committed to your vision. But the vision isn't always clear going forward. We're heading into times when, what's the old saying? Man plans and God laughs. And that may be the best way to describe how these visionaries or these people who start these businesses have to start thinking about, how do I build the infrastructure to take this vision where it can be given the circumstances that we have to deal in.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And the swans do make a difference. So you have to have enough people. And the other problem that they have in succession planning is in attracting a quality of person, because it is their vision, it is their role to run this business. They are the owner. Well, the best who have made this kind of an adjustment understand that the leadership they now have to have is much more inclusive, much more collaborative, and how decisions are made. It isn't only they that can make the decisions. Yeah, they can have the imperator and they can say, I have the extra vote in my pocket if I need it. But the reality is for people to feel included, to feel committed, and to make distributive leadership work, therefore succession planning, because if you get the right leaders around the table, you can see who can take over for you. It'll be much more natural.
Absolutely.
It's tougher in family businesses, I want to point out, because many people around the table don't share the same blood. Okay, they don't share the same DNA. They're not there at the Thanksgiving dinner table with the other. They're there with a different family, right?
Well, that's a great point, and I do want to come to that. Let me pause on a couple of things. What is that decision point for an owner that says, I'm going to let this continue beyond me? Is that often a personal choice?
It's actually two things. You can enter succession planning almost too soon. Sounds a little crazy, but you can also enter too soon. And let me give you an example of what I mean. I'm working with an indoor growing group, okay, and they've talked about needing to build a board. Well, their first facility isn't even open yet. Won't be open for probably a year. They're in talks to acquire 2 more. If you were to talk to the next generation of leaders there, or try and attract a board, it's too early. There's nothing to govern. So you want to get to the point, back to the first question, you want to get to a point where you have something to talk about, because otherwise, and something that someone can dig their teeth into, otherwise succession planning won't work. Okay. The second thing is, there is a point when, and I'm not sure I'm answering your question exactly, but there is a point when you ask yourself, okay, I've taken this in reality as far as I probably can take it and should take it. How do I make then the leap to make this business bigger? Well, the only way you'll attract those quality of people is if they have a piece of the action, and that means part of the decision making and maybe part of the equity, or you're going to have to compensate them in some way. So I think you can get at this a little too early because you're not ready, or you can get at it too late when you're almost pushed to the wall. We've seen this in a number of companies that they get caught betwixt families and so forth. They get caught betwixt and between. So our advice to them is succession planning is an ongoing process.
Okay.
Whether it's inside or it's outside. But it doesn't mean the people that you've been with the longest should be your successors, because businesses change. The old tried and true that got you where you are today may not get you where you need to go in the future. So you want to take a dispassionate look at what the business can be, but you have to have a business to start with before you get to that point.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I love how you've outlined it. You can wait too late, but you can also maybe start a little bit too early. You mentioned a different dynamic between, a family run business and maybe one that's not family run, even in the first generation. There are a couple of things to think about there. Is there a difference in succession planning? And obviously there must be, right, between those two types of businesses.
Well, if it's a private business, let's say, it's not family oriented. It's just, a business that somebody has started. Yeah, he or she has no family members within the business. Maybe he and his wife started it, or she and her husband started it. That's different than if you have a family business. Maybe it's intergenerational and you have kids and you've got, relatives in these businesses. And those become even trickier. Okay. We have one that has 46 family members in a council. And I can tell you only 2 or 3 plus the CEO are in the business themselves. And yet that CEO believes he has to answer to all 46 of them because they're standing by the mailbox waiting for increased dividends and pounding the table for more.
Mhm.
On the other hand, he's trying to expand the business and create more opportunity for future generations. So the more that he dividends out, the less cash he has and resources to expand the business. So, again, it's a gearing that you see in family businesses that you might not see in others. And sometimes the next generation isn't ready. So
Mhm.
succession planning that we've done with those families have been to look for chief executive officers come in and almost be a stopgap that are committed to driving the business forward, meeting the family's responsibilities and expectations, but at the same time having a special mantra to developing the family members to take over at some point.
Yeah.
Now, when I was describing, we brought in somebody who agreed to stay between 2 and 3 years. 2 of the family members were younger. They needed to be cross-fertilized into other operations so that they got the quality of experience. And his job was to be tough on them.
Well, and we'll talk in just a minute about how an outsider coming in, the pros and cons of that and the traps of that. But how do you structure the conversation for a family-owned business to think about bringing in an outsider? In other words, because there are plenty of great stories of family-owned businesses that have stayed that way for 3 generations. When should a family continue to stay in control, and when should it pivot and bring in an outsider, or even considering it?
Every situation is the same and every situation is different, to be honest.
Right.
I've seen both sides of what I'm about to tell you. I've seen families that absolutely believe by birthright that one of them should be running it. But yet the complaints start when the dividends don't come and so forth. So you really have to select the best quality of person, especially if you're several generations in and several generations are expecting to be taken care of, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then you get the others where it's the first generation or maybe the second generation has been involved, but the generations below them aren't interested in the business. They want to be off and do other things. In that case, then the question is the business really worth keeping? And if it is worth keeping, then what kind of leadership do we have to take it to the next generation? Maybe there's children a generation away that are, not even college age today that might want to work in this business and be part of it. But we've seen both ends of the spectrum. Oftentimes, when we look for folks, whether they're looking for the top role or the top 3 or 4 roles in this company, we look for people who understand there's a family dynamic, who understand that they don't share the same DNA as the family. Mm-hmm. But they're brought in because they like working in a family environment. They're committed to the family's set of values, and that's very important. Can't underscore that enough.
Mm-hmm.
They really believe that they can add value and have the quality of life professionally that they'd like to have. An example of that in Atlanta is Chick-fil-A. Okay. Mm-hmm. Where the family has run that business since the founding, but now you'll notice there are senior people in management that aren't family members. Okay, now we've seen that in a number of family businesses now, and sometimes they veer off and they have a family office that holds the equity in that business, and maybe invests in other businesses as well. But the quality of management and leadership is going to be really, really important, whether it's intergenerational or not, different set of commitments, or whether it's just assisting a family get to that next level.
Yeah. Well, let's say picking up on that theme, but pivoting just a little bit. Let's say I've been a first generation business owner, and I'm about, either because of age or just energy or just timing, I'm probably 8 years away from some sort of exit, and I'm thinking about the right kind of succession plan. What are those things I should start thinking about to make sure I have a successful transition to the sustained generation?
You have 2 ways to go. One is you look for leadership, and you still control the equity in that business. You may share some of it with the next generation, whether the next generation of management, not necessarily your family members. Okay, or you sell. Okay, so one recently that we met with as a manufacturer, and family had come over here from another country and rebuilt their business in the United States. And he, the founder, is now close to 70, but he loves the business. He just knows he cannot operate it at this level any longer. And so forth. So he's now said, I will sell the business. I will keep a small piece of the equity, and I will remain as kind of the head of business development because I have all these relationships with these customers. The private equity firm which purchased him wants him to do that.
Sure. Yep.
So when did he really start thinking about this? I think COVID accelerated this for him. Okay. Not that, fortunately, there was nobody who passed away in his family that I know of, but it accelerated this feeling that I'm vulnerable. Running a business is not easy. If you're at the top of the pyramid, it's lonely. So I think he began to think about, life in itself, has a terminal date. I just don't know when it is. So this is the time to make my dream even bigger. I can play a small part in it, but I'm going to have to relieve myself, tell myself I just can't run the operations of this size business the way it needs to be run into the future. But I can really add value to the business by working closely with these customers. So he's been able to set up his own financial future. All of his money was tied up with this business, really. But now he's got a financial future so he can take care of he and his family. Still remains in the business. He doesn't call the shots, but he has the relationships. His name's still on the door, so that'll open doors for the business. And he's got a piece going forward. And
what did he look for in this particular case, or how do you structure the advice around what to look for in that next generation leader? Do you want them to be exactly like you? Do you want them to think differently than you? And how do they structure that?
Well, what we did was we were called in. What we did was we spent time with the private equity group first because we wanted to know what they saw in this business, why they bought this business at this point in time, what they think this business would yield, because no private equity group is buying it for what it was. They always look to say the windshield going forward is much bigger than the rear window, right? So the idea of thinking through what this business could be. So then we began to work backwards to say, okay, if that's really what the alignment, then what's the alignment to value? And what kind of leader can lead that kind of an alignment? So then we spent time with the entrepreneur, the individual who started this business. We asked him what his vision was for it, why he sought help at this point, just as I shared with you. And it was remarkably similar. There were some differences, of course. You're dealing with different people at different walks of life with different interests, but they had the common interest of building this business. And his interest was very much in line. He wanted to be relieved of making the daily tactical decisions of this business. And so did the owners, because they were prepared to invest in new machinery, to do this, new technology, perhaps a change in the ERP systems and what have you. But the owner, he has an interest in all that because it makes the business run efficiently, and he still has 20%. But it's outside of his wheelhouse. His interest is really with the customers. And so we took those two and we melded them together to say, okay, a CEO for this business will have to have these kinds of skills and experiences to meet these expectations in the first 60 days, 90 days, 2 years, whatever it may be. And we had to make sure that the resources were available to that CEO to match the expectations that the owners had, both the private equity firm and the individual, but mostly the private equity firm because they had 80%. We also had to make sure that the individual coming in would truly respect the founder. And we had to make sure that the founder was going to truly respect the decision of the private equity group and who they were going to hire, basically. Although the founder was going to certainly be part of the interview process. But at the end of the day, the decision was going to be with the 80% owner. So that's the way we handled that. And it's about 60 days in at this point. and it's working pretty well. I
Yeah.
talk with them every week or two to see how it's going, what isn't working, what have you, which is something we do with every client. We just don't just do the work. We stay very close to them.
What advice do you give to that newly hired CEO who is stepping in as the successor? How do you coach them to make sure, what are those 3 or 4 things they need to know to make sure that they succeed in taking over?
Unless the company is in crisis, do not make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
First and most important thing you can do is listen. No matter no matter what you've gone through in an interview process, as soon as you cross the schism and step into that corner office, you're going to see surprises and things you hadn't thought of, and situations that you haven't addressed or need to be addressed. You certainly won't know the people and the capabilities. So you want to walk around. You want to listen. The new Starbucks CEO is committed to working in a Starbucks once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, listen to the employees. Because at the end of the day, for you to make decisions that need to be made, that the board has entrusted you to make or the family's entrusted you to make, the only way they're going to be successful is if you win trust. Trust is really the lubricant of success. And if people trust you and you're candid, communicative, open, transparent, but candid, people will actually act accordingly. If they don't know you, they don't trust you, they don't know how you make decisions, they don't know if you're inclusive in your decisions, they won't trust you. And inevitably, the cream of the crop, the best of your people, will leave.
Well, you've illustrated why people do come to you with complex problems to solve. So Joel, again, thank you for joining us on the program. And I look forward to the next one when we get to do this again.
Be my pleasure. Thank you, Cannon.
Hello, welcome back. Cannon Carr here with you. I tell you, I always love my conversations with Joel through the years. He makes you think. He's a great listener. He's a great creative problem solver. So and always enjoy my time and certainly appreciate him being with us today. Today, we really heard about a great framework to think about hiring your successor. When to do it, why to do it, how to do it, who to do it, who to hire for it. And as I think about that framework, maybe there are 3 or 4 quick takeaways I thought I'd highlight from today's show. The first one is, when is the right time to think about a successor and begin succession planning? And in a nutshell, Joel points out why it's an ongoing process. He does point out why it can be too early sometimes when you're in survival mode and defining and building the business. But once it's up and running, you don't want to wait till too late when you're pushed, your back's pushed up against the wall. And his point is about being ongoing is that as it grows, as your business grows, as the industry changes, you get bigger demands put on yourself as the founder and the owner, on your time and your talents, and situations start to outgrow who you are. So, I think in answering the question when, it requires great self-awareness, and I think great recognition of where your business and your team are at any given moment in terms of strengths, weaknesses, relative to the competition. He said, I think there are really 2 quick tests here. One for yourself, when you ask the question, have I taken this as far as I can or I should? And if the answer is yes, I think that uncovers a strong signal about succession planning, the need for it. And when you look at your existing team, are they no longer the complete set of skills that you need, or not the right fit in some way, especially as businesses change? So there, that starts to indicate the profile of not only, when you would hire somebody, when you would begin succession planning, but what type of skill set you would look to bring in, to fill gaps in your current situation. So I think that's why he talks about being ongoing and fluid, but definitely don't want to be waiting too late for it. Secondly, how do you attract that quality leader or that quality successor? He talked about how leadership is more inclusive today. In other words, it's not just about you, the founder. I mean, again, as the business outgrows you and your skill set and your time capabilities, you are handing off, in theory, more and more key functions to other people. And so, that successor coming in most likely wants to be, not only included in key decisions, but gradually taking those over and having capability of making those decisions. And he also mentioned, probably that equity creation part of the business too. A new leader coming in is probably going to want that incentive and that reward, and thinking through how to do that in a way that works for you and the new team and the new leader is certainly important. Third, Joel gave us a great game plan in the form of advice for the successor CEO once on board. He said, unless the business is in a crisis, do not make quick decisions. In other words, don't try to do too much too early. He said it was more important to listen as you get into the business and learn from the team. I mean, of course, whenever we start something new, there are always surprises, always situations you didn't expect. So you want to go ahead and be able to learn about those. And he said, take time to build that trust with the new teammates. If you're the successor CEO, they've got to get to know who you are, what your values are, how you make decisions. That builds trust, and that gives the successor time and space and authority to ultimately make decisions that improve the business, but certainly affect all the people involved with it and many of the traditions that have been involved with it. So great points there. Finally, Joel did talk about the importance of advisors who can help you and advisors who you can trust. He used the words, allow people to help you. Many times founders are afraid to do that or often are blind to it and don't see how important what we call an ecosystem is to helping them succeed. So time and time again in this podcast series, we often hear about the value of that ecosystem. You're not an island, and being able to recognize how trusted advisors can help fill gaps for you, help you see around corners, so important. So appreciated Joel making that point. As a final closing thought, we did talk a little bit about the difference between, private businesses and private businesses that are family owned and family run. And the family business often brings a different dynamic. And it often boils down to, when you pay a dividend or want to reinvest in the business, and the family members who receive the dividend but aren't involved with running the business can often feel tension between reinvesting in the business and paying that dividend. And so navigating that important, we call it rewarding on one end where you're paying the dividend for owners and reinvesting in the business. That's one of the three. Those are the two of the three R's that we often talk about. Getting that dynamic tension correct is particularly sensitive and often in family businesses. So appreciated Joel making that point. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I of course got a lot out of it myself, always do with Joel, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to learn more about exit strategies for business owners? Visit cornercappodcast.com for a free copy of our ebook with everything you need to know to make a smooth transition out of your business. Tune back in next week for another episode